Chapter 6, Post-Ignorance, Dr. Clyde Cooley. My house falls to the Orwellians. In 1999, Weber State finally announced an MBA program. I knew it was going to be Dr. Cooley's baby. I knew if I had the very first MBA from Dr. Cooley, I would be able to go anywhere I want in the finance world. His office was right there. This is the Water School of Business. This is the building. So I planned to leave my job and freelance for the firm and go back to school. I would check with Dr. Cooley every week and ask him or the finance secretary, am I still on the top of the list? No letter A's. Nope, Kev, you are still on top of the list. Dr. Cooley and I, after my graduation in '96, had become very good friends. It was his recommendation that landed my job on Wall Street. He loved to watch me trade derivatives. He was born and raised in Chicago, a University of Chicago chemist. He loved the futures and options pits. He wanted to know everything I was up to. So I knew I was quitting. I told Ryan, my best friend at the time, what I was going to do. I told him first I'm knocking that punk out. And then the punk, you know, from my Wall Street there. I'm going to sleep with the gold digger. This gold digging wife of his all over me every day, whatever. Ryan knew I was not kidding, so sure enough, just 2 days later, the punk started on me. I finally snapped and said, I will tell you what, the gym has a ring in it. The gym where we all went in Lower Manhattan. Let's fight tonight. $10,000 to the winner from the other. You got it, he says. I knew he was full of shit. I had been dealing with bullies my whole life. I was known as the bully buster in high school. My brother Brad, who worked as an executive human resource exec for Novell and Omega at the time, still to this day tells a story that in our Weber High days, when I was a junior and he a sophomore, there was a fight out on the front lawn of the school. There was 2,000 kids at that school. Huge school. Very common in those days. The whole school was gathered around. Weber High had well over 2,000 students in those days. There was not one but two of the biggest redneck bully seniors the school fighting 120-pound long-haired kid. Me, I hated those bully Bullwinkle punks. I was fighting them both, which was nothing new for me. I had been doing it my whole life. My father, Dwayne Blanch, my uncles, Claude Blanch, Larry Blanch, Harold Blanch, all great Weber County athletes. Maybe the greatest athletes to ever come out of this freaking county. Claude would tell everyone for years, Kevin has issues, and he is the youngest in history to ever charge the mound. I first charged the mound in 1968 at the age of 8 and never stopped to this day. My dad was my baseball coach. And I really did charge the mound at 8. I've been charging it ever since. I grew up in a family, on a family ranch. A family of much bigger athletes in size than I. All boys, dozens of boys, all bigger than me, all great athletes, every last one of them. When the fight broke out on Weber High's lawn, I had just been kicked off the wrestling team for the second year in a row for drinking. This was Mormon fake wannabe North Ogden. Every wannabe faker in the county had moved to North Ogden over the past decade. Men with hairspray and all, not all Ogden for the rest of the country, not even close. And the fake capital of Weber County, the school had been moved to a ridiculous geographical spot from 12th and Washington to Cooleyville, not Clyde Cooleyville. As the building on 12th and Washington, the old Grand Weber High, was a Leslie Hodson masterpiece. As the demolition contractors, my grandpa was a demolition contractor, said it bankrupted me. It was so well built, it was like Fort Knox, like Ogden High, like West High, like so many of these Leslie Hodson, Mariner Eccles magnificent projects. Wattis right here, Wattis Construction, Utah Construction, that's who this building is. He said the wrecking ball was bouncing off the building, but these morons tore it down. I remember reading that the demolition contractor, which the business my grandfather was in, dirt and demolition contractors, said when he used the wrecking ball it bounced off. The old Weber High School was a Leslie Hodson, Mariner Eccles WPA fortress and masterpiece. I truly believe it is one of the most well-built architecture important masterpieces this state has ever torn down. Oh yeah, before I forget, if any of you old Weber Highers are wondering where the magnificent old concrete fish at the entrance of that Weber High is, I know where it is, and the fake Mormon who stole it. The merchant has it. So that there used to be this grand concrete cooler than hellfish. It's worth a lot of money, that Leslie Hodson had designed is set on there, and everybody's wondering, Sham that owned, he calls himself a high-ranking Mormon that owned Stop and Shop. He stole it, and I'll tell you how I know he stole it. I know where it's at. A kid that used to work for me worked for him. He said it had it stored in a storage shed, so that's factual, and I hope he comes after me. Sham, who owned Stop and Shop, stole it. He has it. He's a Mormon white-collar criminal. He has it in a storage shed. That's what kind of creeps these people are, these fake radical freaking call themselves Christians in hairspray. The coaches would only allow the good boys that attended church to play. Why do you think all those tens of thousands of great young athletes Weber County has, farm boys, not to mention our pathetic coaches? We could not even win with the likes of Tom Chambers and Rulon Jones. I know Tom moved to Colorado. I know it is like when a certain Hall of Fame coach was asked, why do you think Jerry Sloan has never been Coach of the Year? And he replied, give me Stockton and Malone for 18 years and I will have 5 or 6 NBA championship banners hanging up. Only a very tiny few that have played at the college and professional level. Our football and basketball teams were pathetic. We're talking some of the greatest athletes in the history of this country right here in this county. We never won anything. The worst coaches in the history of the pathetic, because it is the Mormon dynamic. If you're not the goody two-shoe Mormon boy, you don't play. And that's why they always lose. I mean, it really is pathetic. I was a very good athlete, just like the rest of the Blanch boys, but I was a long-haired with a drinking problem. We lost the state championship the next year by 1 point. Our wrestling coach had kicked me off the team. And later in life, I found out that I was a Blanch boy in a long list of Blanch boys that regularly beat him in every sport in his wannabe athletic days. The 112-pound replacement never hit the top 6 board. I would commonly pin my replacement in seconds. I was 30-0 against him. But he attended church, and I was a non-drinker, and he was a non-drinker good boy. Pathetic is the word. He tried to apologize one day after picking me up hitchhiking. I told him, I understand your fake religious bias. You do know I'm a Mormon. And let me out here, I watch me the rock. Have a nice day. John Webb is his name. I was an undefeated wrestler. I was a very good wrestler. Never lost, ever, ever. Kicked me off 2 years in a row. We lost the state championship by 1 point. My weight replacement, God bless him, who's dead now, Ned, who I loved him, one of my best friends, a great artist when we was kids, who died of a heart attack, just like that years ago. They kicked me off, and we never hit the top 6th place. We lost by 1 point, and then he tried to fight. He was a punk, and I look back on it now, and my Uncle Claude, who could be the greatest athlete to ever come out of this county, you know, he was a fighter pilot. When he come back, and I told him this story, whatever, and he knew, and he says, oh, that wannabe punk, are you kidding? No wonder he kicked you off. That's the dynamic here. So to the gym we went. No headgear. Instead, the fight lasted less than 1 round as he was flopping like a fish with a hook in his head in less than 2 minutes. I knew he was a fraud. My best friend, little Jerry, I grew up, was a world-class kickboxer and a 6th-degree black belt. He would never say a peep, as humble as it gets. It is part of the martial art teaching. I knew that. Later that night, like clockwork, she showed up with the line I have heard my entire life from cheating married females. We are legally separated, and can I go to you and Ryan's place tonight? Go ask Ryan, I said. I heard him said, of course you can. He was egging the whole thing on the whole time. He loved it. It is like the yellow sticker on the car justifying the mass murder of thousands. Makes it all right. I'm separated like the yellow sticker. Small little justification. Sickos. The next morning I walked into the office very early and started to clean out my office. I knew this time it was over. Anthony was there, as I knew he would be as usual. He said, come in, Kev. You know I have to call you in. I know I'm getting my stuff. He said, I heard the entire story. I said, which part? The fight or after the fight? He said both. This guy did not miss anything when it came to his employees. He had eyes and ears everywhere, and I knew that. He said, I have wanted to do that for years. That punk has needed his ass kicked for years. My wife would not let me, or I would have done it myself, said Anthony. Was old, but he was strong and very intimidating when he was in the mindset. He could have done it there, and no doubt in my mind. It's like when Karl Malone would say, there are only 2 people in the NBA I fear, and they are both on my team, John Stockton and Jerry Sloan. He was like Jerry Sloan, but older and powerful, and I mean powerful in the financial world. I I know, did you sleep with her? I will say it like this. When I was in high school, I had long, crazy blonde hair and had a serious drinking habit. In the 1970s, everyone from the Cooleys, I call them, no reference to Clyde, the North Ogden wannabes, the Cooleys, everyone from the Mountain Farm kids, Eden, Huntsville, Liberty, to the Western Weber County Farm kids as well. I showed up to the keg parties, which I was typically, or one of my friends were typically organizing. The Cooley girls would not be seen in public with the long-haired drinking maniacs. It was taboo. There was rumors about the hottest one-year-old cheerleader sneaking off late night at a party with the drunken long-haired maniac, me, Kevin Blanch. I had this girl, she was a year older than me. Oh, that girl was incredible. But the dynamic was, as I was a heathen, long-haired, she'd hang around me, blah, 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 at night, show up to keg parties, whatever, you know, because it was such a class system. It was such an incredible class system up there, still is. My friends had heard the rumors. No one believes it. One night she showed up. I said, go ask her. I'm saying nothing. I had no idea what she told them, but I do know that I got a lot of respect from the Cooley boys and girls after that. I was going back to Weber to get the first MBA from Clyde. Tony knew Clyde. He had went to the University of Chicago and grew up there. He respected Clyde, and he would call him and check in with him. It took a lot of this man to respect anyone. He was shrewd as deductive thinking, 40 in mind, and serious power. He was a genius, self-made billionaire. He said, oh no, you're not quitting me. You can work from Weber right here in the Wattis lab, right here. Go back to school in the place I had always loved, my favorite place in the world to this day, Weber State University. In 1968, we took a field trip to the Weber with Mrs. Smith, West Weber Elementary, the great Leslie Hodson masterpiece. Mrs. Smith, the wife of the great educator Smith himself. That's that day. That's the day I'm talking about. That's Bobby was here that day on this campus, Bobby Kennedy, 100 days before he was killed. At Weber, Bobby Kennedy was speaking in 1960. He went to the school as a science project, or an art, I cannot remember, I did, but us and our kids. But it was not to hear Bobby's speech. I remember I won a cake that day, and the young Weber State students gave me and my twin sister Karen an incredible amount of attention. We did look like little Scandinavian book characters. Later I walked out of the Union building, and there stood my great uncle. He said, what are you doing here, boy? I'm on a field trip, he said. Bobby Kennedy is speaking here today. You stay with me. You can meet our next president. It is something you will never forget. Where is Karen? Karen, my twin sister. My uncle was an amazing person, very close personal friends with Mariner Eccles, very tight with him. Both out of this secret society I speak about, Freed Knickers, right here, with the Wattises, with the McKays, with the Eccles. They were a tight group. He was an amazing, Al Hunsaker was his name, incredible. He was an actor in Hollywood, but self-made, he had so much money. He was an amazing guy. She is right over there with Mrs. Smith. I do not think she will let me, he said. I will handle that. He came back and said, Karen does not feel well. She is going home. I will take you to your grandma's house after. She, like I, ate too much of the cake. I had one. So we went. He made sure that I got to meet Bobby. He shook my hand. Remember, this was Weber County, the economic powerhouse, the Democratic stronghold of the West, the home of Mariner Eccles, the home of Alan Ashton's grandfather, the president of the Mormon Church, David O. McKay. That building right there named David O. McKay building. The home of the Browning fortune. That building named the Browning right there. The home of the Eccles banking fortune. The home of the great Utah construction Wattis, EO, right here. This is the EO Wattis School of Business right here. And W.H. Wattis and Thomas D., the D Hospital right there. The D Nursing School right there. No Republican stood a chance at any office in this country or the state of Utah in the 60s. Frank Moss was our very powerful senator who had beaten Ernest Wilkinson in 1964. Another Weber County man, the powerful D.C. attorney, BYU president. Cal Rampton, our very powerful government. Gun McKay, our great liberal congressman in northern Utah's district. In love with Weber State, of course. My uncle was right about one of the two. He was right about one of the two. Bobby Kennedy, meet our next president, a day I will never forget. I did not ever forget that day. But we know what happened on June 6, just a few short weeks later. A terrorist from the Middle East. His bloodline's from the Middle East. A stall mucker at Santa Anita. Remember, Sirhan Sirhan tried to kill Nixon right before too. I mean, he was just hell-bent on killing somebody in power. He almost pulled that off. Changed the course of history dramatically. My mother and I had stayed up late that night watching the California results. It was too late. I went to bed. I got up and walked into the kitchen like every morning. My mother, with her simple cotton dress and apron on, listening to Len Allen of KLO, our only Ogden station that everyone listened to. Len Allen in the 60s and 70s was the Ogden icon. Dodgers baseball, Weber State's basketball. Listened to her kitchen white Bakelite radio. She was crying. AAA Dodgers baseball. Tommy Lasorda, manager here. Don Zimmer managed the Gulls in Salt Lake. Garvey played here. They were all playing here. Buckner played here. Huff played here. I mean, you go over and over and over. Len Allen, who just recently died. I heard it. I heard Len Allen say he was dead. Bobby was dead. I wrote a poem for this book about Bobby. I want to read this. I wrote this on 6/6/08. Bobby's tired left hand. It has been 40 years ago today. Bobby was killed in 1968. June 6th, I played in our giant wood barn with my cousins. That day has always stood in my mind. I could sense that the change then. I later lived the change. That day in 1968, I stood and talked to my cousins about things like my baptism and the death of the JFK and recent death of Dr. King. Our family were Democrats. My father, his brothers and sisters, very political, as we were, the entire country was. Today, I unintentionally stood on the exact same spot talking to my cousin about politics. 40 years and one massive journey. There I am in the exact spot, talking about the exact same subject matter. Our barn was gone 3 months later. Our liberal progressive country slowly gone. My mother and I stayed up late to watch the California results. We live on mountain time. It was late in the west, early in the AM in the east. I fell asleep, and in the morning I woke up and walked in the kitchen like I always did. My mom was in the 60s, looking as it gets. She was making breakfast. I was in tears. She said nothing. She had a Bakelite white radio on the kitchen counter. KLO, the only news we ever really got on the radio in the county. Len Allen, he passed 2 years ago. Bobby was dead. The feeling was like the one when I watched my father being loaded into the body bag. I was 8, then 48. Kevin Blanch, June 6, 2008, 64 days from D-Day. So it was the first day of the first semester. I had graduated in 1996. With the promise to make up 2 classes in the School of Business, would not let me graduate that year in 1960. It was very important to me that I graduate that year. We had the highest score in the country that year in the senior testing in our School of Business. The Wada School of Business was going to be ranked #1 in the country. I knew that, and it was one of my tests. There was only 27 of us. Our test, we were the #1 ranked in the country that year. I needed to graduate in that class. It was important. The only 27 grads from Dr. Cooley's finance program this year, so the school via Dr. Cooley allowed me to graduate with knowing I needed to go back and finish some very early math classes that one of the greatest fakes of all time demanded I do so. Dick Alston, small little dick. What a little prick. But anyway, I think it needs to be said in the context of Fukushima, after I wrote this before Fukushima happened, as this school of business right here, there was only 27 graduates, the #1 school of business in the country. Dr. Cooley, the greatest finance professor in the history of the Western United States for decades and decades. Half of them were Japanese. And they were brilliant. They were incredible brilliant. And that's how I've kept my ties with the Japanese community over there and what has gone on with Fukushima. One of the biggest fakes of all time, later in this book, I had clept out of the early math classes, a lucky test day. I clept out by 1 point. Matt Godfrey, who was the mayor here for years, was the he was the stats professor then, working on his master's degrees. Now is our mayor. On his test, I would always get the answers right, but not show my work. He didn't like it, so he would knock my grade down. I confronted him. I went to school with him. and his very intelligent wife. Both of them were extremely intelligent. He and his wife were both valedictorians out of this school of business. Brilliant, both of them. It must be noted, I was not the greatest student in the context of grades. I was at times. I got the Clyde Cooley, I said I got the highest scores in the history of his teaching on several tests, but then there was other ones, you know, as my mind jumps around. I was running a very large plastering and stucco business at the time, Kevin Blanch Plastering. I was raising 3 daughters, not to mention all of the other bad things I was up to in those days. I had a lot of money, gambling, girls. He made a deal with me. If you stand in front of the whole class tomorrow and show me how you arrive at that problem and get the problem, I'll give you the credit. I will correct your grade. I will give you an A. The Stats 260 class is required by all business students, so the class was very large, about 80 to 100 students was very large for this campus. This campus is typically 15, 20 students. That's why it was such an incredible school of business. It's not now. It's off the cliff now. Very rare at Weber State in those days. They prided themselves in those days for small classes and great professors, and it was so true. Matt drew the problem on the board. I went to work and very quickly said, I balance this side to this side. I could cancel out this side, and the answer is here. So then he gave me a second problem and presented it like this. If Apple is trading at X amount of the dollars per share, and the Dow is trading at blah, 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 a very long, complicated problem. I said the answer is 0, because Apple is not a Dow stock or a component of the Dow. It is a NASDAQ equity and has nothing to do with the Dow. The Dow is an index of 30 stocks. Matt almost fell over. He said, I guess you are right. That is one crazy brain of yours. I will have to run this by the midget, Holzman. Of course, the midget did not like it. He was in the height of his great inflation rant. The 4-foot-tall fake was doing what he always did, trying to grow. I told him one day, you have runt syndrome worse than me, and I know I have a serious chip. You have a boulder on your shoulder. The ironic part of this is I had to save his house from the ignorant decision he made to put fake stucco on his house, paint right over the wood, Sunwest stucco. Special, and the entire thing was full of mold. I had to take his ignorant ass by the hand and get his house re-stuccoed for free. I saved his dumb ass, fake ass. You know, it kills me how he threw me under the bus, whatever, and then he came to me, and I saved his molded up, I saved him $100,000, easy. I went after him, I got his house re-stuccoed for free after he threw me under the bus. So of course the midget was not about to let me graduate with taking the entire level math class after I had clept out of it. He said, no, you scored a 12 and the cutoff was 13. It had to be changed sometime that year. Dr. Cooley, who intimidated the midget big time, Cooley was 10 times what he ever dreamed of being. And the little tiny time, because of the fact he was about 5,000 times more intelligent and educated than the arrogant midget, Dr. Cooley agreed to have a talk with the arrogant fake midget and said, with me standing next to him, are you kidding? Kevin got the highest score I ever given in my 420 class, ever. And you are going to stopping his education for 1 point disciplinary? You are a fool. I still have that test results framed right next to my letter of recommendation, the last letter of recommendation Dr. Cooley ever wrote. And he didn't write letters of recommendation. So the deal was made by Dr. Cooley. I would agree to retake the class I needed while taking the required first MBA classes. I walked in the first day of the first semester of the first class, Dr. Cooley's investment class. There stood Dr. Matson. Where is Dr. Cooley, I said. You have not heard? No. I knew right then and there it was either dead or was close to it. As I have stated earlier, I had seen that response before in my life. Dr. Cooley was dying. Just a couple of weeks earlier, I had been calling his office and no callback. He was always returned every call I ever made. I figured maybe he was just out on a golfing vacation. Maybe Mesquite or Vegas. He loved to play golf. He would walk into class in this green jacket, and all you guys that had him know, we used to call it his master's jacket. You know it was on that day. If he had that green jacket, oh, was it on that day. He would wear a green jacket on his infamous test days. Everyone knew it was going to be a hard day if Dr. Cooley had the green jacket on. Everyone called it his master's jacket. Only 2 tests a quarter. That was the entire grade. Students would faint and throw up in those days. For real, it was high pressure big time. I know there he goes again. A letter of recommendation or getting through his program could literally mean millions. This was very serious stuff. In his 440 class, the very last class of his notoriously challenging program, was entirely presentations, case studies, very high-level corporate case studies in front of him and other 26 students. There were 2 Japanese young female students in that group of ours. They were amazing. Dr. Cooley was very big on his students being flawless public speakers. He would say, "Mr. Blanch, your time in the barrel, your time to shine." One single ah or a pause or a noise was a full grade drop. There you were. And you were out if you got 2 of those. The foreign students amazed me. First, they were speaking in a second or third foreign language to begin with, and then the finance level was a foreign language of its own. The case studies were complex, and he knew exactly the solution in exact terms. I was not the greatest student, and he went at me in class many times. There were times I was sure he hated me.